I grew up on a diet of classic World War II movies like The Dam Busters, The Great Escape, and The Guns of Navarone. They were about heroic men doing heroic things in desperate circumstances. Everyone looked like a film star because, of course, everyone was a film star. If you got shot, you fell to the ground in a swoon and died very quickly. There was always a stirring soundtrack. But I've just finished reading A History of the Second World War by Max Hastings. The title of the book is All Hell Let Loose. It's a horrific picture of war. The only soundtrack is the relentless drumbeat of blood, violence, suffering, and death. And the figures he gives are almost unbelievable. Over 60 million people dead, with 27 million people dying in Russia alone. Any romanticism I had about war has now completely disappeared. So when I come to a military museum like this one here in Margate, I appreciate the heroism, but also the tragedy and the horror. It's hard to ignore the reality of human suffering, and no wonder that people often use the word evil to describe what they experience. We know this from history. We know this in smaller ways from our own experience. When we suffer, and especially when we see the suffering of others, we have a sense that things are not the way they are meant to be. Something has gone wrong. The Bible is so helpful because it speaks about both the goodness of creation, but also about the reality of evil. It explains how God gave this incredible gift of freedom to the spiritual beings that we call angels. Some of the angels, led by Satan, the devil, abused this freedom. They turned away from God, and since then, they have been trying to do harm and turn others against God too. Human beings were meant to live in friendship with God and with each other. And in the Bible, in the book of Genesis, the Garden of Eden represents the paradise that existed at the beginning of human history. But our first parents, Adam and Eve, refused to trust God and turned away from him in disobedience. They were deceived by the false promises of the devil and became trapped in their own selfishness. This tragic moment is known as the fall. This is the meaning of sin. It's not just when we make a mistake out of human weakness. That's natural. It's when we do something that we know is wrong and deliberately turn away from God. It damages our friendship with God and with each other. It can lead us to eternal separation from Him, which is the meaning of hell. Human beings live under the burden of the original sin that took place in the Garden of Eden. We live in the shadow of sin and death. There is so much goodness around, but there is also a moral and spiritual wound that cuts through the human race and that each one of us shares in. I saw a powerful symbol of this in an exhibition at Tate Modern. It was called Shibboleth by the Colombian artist Doris Salcedo. She created a crack in the floor of the gallery in the enormous turbine hall. It started as a tiny fracture at the top of the ramp near the entrance doors, but it spread along the whole length of the hall, getting wider and deeper as it went, and more dangerous to those walking by. Most artists put something into a gallery. This one showed the foundations of the gallery being torn apart. It made me think of how fragile ordinary life can be. When, for example, there is tension between colleagues at work, when there is an argument in the family, when you do something wrong and you don't want to admit it, and you don't know how to put it right. Some people don't like the language of sin, but I think it can be helpful. It keeps us honest. We can admit that our own hearts are not completely innocent. We can admit the reality of evil. We don't have to pretend. And in a strange way, this can lead us to God, because we realize how much we need His help, and something within us longs for His forgiveness and salvation. This is the most important story in the Bible, the story of hope. Even when Adam and Eve lose their place in the Garden of Eden, God does not abandon them or their descendants. He is constantly reaching out to them. He is like a shepherd looking for the lost sheep, calling people to Himself. And when His Son Jesus steps into history, the hopes of the whole of humanity can finally be fulfilled.